So, how are you, Joe?
I'm well. I'm well. It's really great to be here, and if I may, enchanté.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today, Joe. And today you will share with us, I'm quite sure, some great stuff about body language and also how to become more effective in our personal life through nonverbal communication. So, perhaps as a starting point for this interview,
Yep.
what brought you into this fascinating field of body language?
Well, it's a great question, and I'm glad you asked that one first because I think what brought me to it was necessity. Necessity as a child because I was born in Cuba, and then after Fidel Castro, we fled to the United States, and there was the necessity to understand a new culture, to understand people. And so, just out of curiosity, I think I was very interested in the body language of others, even though I was only 8 years old. And what I found interesting that always the body language was more accurate than what people would say. Some people might say, "Oh, they like you," or "You're nice," but when you look at their body language, you realize that no, that's not really
Yeah.
what they mean. And I think that always stuck with me. And then when I was in my first year of college, I ran into a book that had been written by Darwin, and it was this other book that he had written where he had studied animals and compared animal behaviors to human behaviors, and something sort of clicked in my head, and I said, "Yes, I've seen this too. I've seen how when a child is scared, we cover ourselves and put our hands on our side in the same way that a dog brings its ears close to its body when it's scared. I've seen this before, and there's something to it, and that's sparked a curiosity. I mean, then once I was in the FBI, of course, everybody thinks of the FBI as being somewhere between James Bond and one of these other fiction thrillers, but really, an FBI agent is really a paid observer. You're really observing people, you're observing behavior, you're cataloging behavior. And I found that in my career, the most useful thing that I ever got to use was my ability to observe body language and to be able to decipher what people were actually doing. So I think necessity drove it. And of course, in the 70s, there weren't a lot of books. Now there's a lot of them. When I started in this in America, body language was taught by psychiatrists and psychologists, and they intentionally make it hard. I mean, they stay up nights trying to make something hard.
Yeah, I know what you
And
mean.
as I studied it, because the career I was in, you don't have a lot of time. When you don't have the luxury of time. You've got to get to work. You've got to analyze someone maybe in 5 seconds, maybe 8 seconds. You don't have all day. And they talk about, well, we'll put up a camera and we'll videotape it and then we'll slow it down and we'll do this for six or
Yeah.
7 hours. I go,
But how
you're
can you do it in the real life? It's like,
Yeah. So what I decided to do was teach it the way that I thought it should be taught, and really to simplify it, to make it as easy to understand as possible, which is why I came up with this model uh, of that a baby is born, we're born communicating whether we're comfortable or uncomfortable. And if you can understand that at a basic level, you can understand so much about body language.
mhm.
And that's a way that it's never been taught before. It's always been taught, I mean, just so differently. And to this day, I still don't understand why they make it so hard.
Okay, very interesting. So you worked as a special agent for the FBI, and as you said, for me it's like movie stuff. So FBI like catching the bad guys and so forth. But I'm sure in real life, for your work, it's something quite different. So
Well,
perhaps,
let me say this. I mean, it was exciting.
yeah,
We did things that you read about in books. We did things that you see in movies. But when you break it down, in the end, um, the same thing that I was doing, I was observing behavior. But if you are if you're a doctor, you're observing behavior. You're observing things. If you're an attorney, a barrister, you're doing the same thing. If you work with people in any way, uh, you're doing the same thing. We look for different things, but it's all about the same. And you know, when people ask me, well, what's the application of body language? I can think of no profession except maybe engineering that doesn't use
mhm.
body language, and even then, your engineer needs good body language when he makes presentations. So it's just something that everybody can benefit from.
Okay. And how do you proceed to conduct such an interview with criminals or regarding nonverbal communication? What was the process?
Well, that's also a very good question. My process was to always observe before you got to the point where you actually do an interview. So I like to see people as they're working. Let's say I was going to interview you tomorrow. I would go to where you were working and actually go into your store and walk around and see how you deal with people, how you react. I want to know what you're like when you're normal, because you know if somebody calls you up and says the FBI wants to talk to you, you're going to
Yeah.
get nervous, you're going to get tense, and that nervousness and tension affects my perceptions of you. Now, if I didn't have that chance, then I would start to look at people as they maybe parked in the parking lot or in the garage to see how do they walk? What's their attitude? Are they something so simple as are they fixing their tie and their clothes as they're coming in to talk to me?
Hmm.
Okay, that tells me right away they care about how they look, and they may try to show respect towards me, or they you know they may come in with a little bit of an attitude. So I always try to assess them as far in advance as I could. And then usually the first 30 minutes, 40 minutes I spend just getting to know them. I never ask any question. I mean, a lot of times they'll jump in and say, "What's this about? What's this about?" And I'll say, you know, I'll say, before we get started, I need to ask you some questions. Where did you grow up?
Hmm.
What kind of books do you like to read? And the reason for that is because I want to see how they communicate. I want to see what kind of vocabulary they have. I want to see how much education they have. I want to see how nervous they are. Are they getting more nervous or less nervous? And so that was, you know, that was my technique, because interviewing, at least for the FBI, is not like what you see on television. What you see on television is very artificial, because on TV what you see is they're interviewing to get compliance. In the FBI, we interview to get cooperation. We
Hmm.
want somebody to want to talk to us every day. And that's the big difference. When you get them to cooperate,
Yeah.
then they tell you everything. When you only get compliance, you only get as much as they're willing to reveal to you.
Okay. I think what you spoke about, like when you said I was looking for normal behavior, it's like what we call the baseline or something like that.
Yes, baselines, or some people call them the benchmark,
Benchmark. Okay.
something that you can look at and compare, because you can create stress, but if you create stress through the interview process, then you're really altering the experiment. You're
Hmm.
affecting what you're observing.
Okay. Um, I want to switch. Like I think it's a hot subject. It's like it's good to know what the gesture mean, but I think observation is like also a big part of the whole body language picture. But often it's a skill people miss or they are not aware of observation. So, what do you think about it? And do you have some advice to improve observation?
Yeah, well, I think you're onto something there, because our parents teach us to look, look left, look right, look at you know, but they don't teach us to observe. And observation is different. Observation is being able to look at all the little nuances and decipher what it means. And even professionals have a tough time with it, because I train a lot of medical doctors, and I had one yesterday who was at this conference in Dearborn, Michigan, and he said to me, this is the fifth time I've heard your lecture, and I learned something new about the face I didn't know. And most people, for instance, look at the face, but they don't look at the forehead. They don't look at the nose. They don't look at the eyes. They don't look at the area between the lip and the nose, which is called, this little area is called the philtrum. They don't look at the lips or the chin independent of each other and
Mm.
say, all right, what did the head say? What did the chin say? And so a lot of times I'll ask, well, when he made that statement, was his chin out or was it down? Was it were the lips full, or did they disappear? So they look at the person, but they don't really observe. And of course, really good observers make for really good clinicians, attorneys, police officers. In fact, one of the things that I argue is that what really can set someone apart in any profession is the ability to observe.
Hmm.
Because all your great scientists, I mean, whether you go to Copernicus, or you go to, it doesn't matter, Newton, they were all great observers. And so when you look at it and you say, well, what made these people different? They observed. One of the things that you can go to any university in the world and say, do you have a class on observation? And they look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
And yet, that is the number one thing that differentiates the average from
Yeah.
the exceptional.
Yeah.
It's the only thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the ability to observe.
And to change paradigm.
Right, or
Yeah.
and to say, look, let's not look at this way. Look at
Yeah.
it
Just a way.
a different way.
Hmm.
And and so when we look at people who are in the diplomatic corps who are really good, who are they? They're really good observers. They know what's going on. They
Yeah.
can sense this is a topic we can talk about or not talk about. And it really doesn't matter what profession you're in. I think this in part, he didn't specifically say this, but this in part was what Daniel Goleman was talking about in his book, Emotional Intelligence and Social Intelligence. It's one of the most undervalued things. But the thing that will assure your success is not your college education, but your emotional intelligence. Is how well can you get along with
Hmm.
people? How well can you communicate? Can you read people? it's a wonderful skill.
So yeah, it's like so we spoke about observation. If we go deeper in this field, and you said also you are learning every day, something like that. So how do you train yourself now?
Well, yeah, and I forgot to answer that question. And so, how do you train yourself? Well, and that's what I did because there was nobody to train me.
Yeah.
When I went into the FBI, you were told certain things, but you really weren't taught to observe. I think the first thing is you need to have the willingness to learn, the willingness to recognize, you know what, my mother and father did well, but they didn't teach me everything I need to know to observe people. You also have to recognize, yes, I studied law, or I studied medicine, or I studied psychology, but they didn't teach me everything. Once you do that, then you say, well, now how do I improve it? And that's where good books come in. I think that now there are so many good books. For instance, Desmond Morris's books, People Watching, Body Watching, Man Watching, David Gibbons. I think we all need guidance. I certainly have had guidance. But I think we all need guidance and support and somebody sharing with us and say, well, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? And then once you are, once you are aware of these things, then making an effort to validate. And that's what I spend a lot of time doing. So I'll meet somebody on the street and all of a sudden I notice that their right foot is pointed in the other direction. So I'll say, do you have to go somewhere? And they go, oh yeah, I'm running late. And it validates over and over,
Yeah.
yes, when a foot moves into the direction of an exit, this person needs to leave. The limbic brain is saying, we have to go.
Yeah.
And it's demonstrating it before the person even says it. Or you see a person talking about something and you see them touching their neck right here. And you go, did that bother you, or are you concerned? And you go, yeah, I really, and you realize that any neck touching is revealing concerns, issues, insecurities. But what I've trained myself to do is not accept, and I tell this to people, even if you read my book, don't just accept what I say.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Just test it.
Test it.
Yeah.
Test it every day.
Yeah.
And what happens is the more you test it, the less you have to think about it.
Yeah.
Now when I see someone and their lips disappear, or they touch their neck, or they ventilate, right? They're doing one of these, they're ventilating. I know there's a problem. I don't know what it is, but I know there's an issue.
Yeah.
And the question is, what is it? And that's what I tell people. Validate it. Make it fun. If you have children, teach children. How do you know that those two children like each other? Well, they're both sitting down. They're both leaning into each other. They both have relaxed faces. That's great. Because you know what? You're going to see that 20 years from now on your first job. How do you know when they don't like each other? Look at the way that guy turned around. Where do you see that? You see that in politics.
Yeah.
You're going to see that 40 years later. And so you make a game of it, and children love games. Children love to prove that, I can see that, I can see.
Yeah, so Joe, thank you very much for your time to share with us these great materials, and I really appreciated this call. You shared with us very valuable information, so thank you one more time, and see you soon.
We'll see you later.
Bye.